Hello everyone, this is Manohar Reddy, Department of Cybersecurity, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today I am going to discuss about the concept of problem solving on transaction operations. Transaction operation. So in generally, the transaction is nothing but different types of activities or different types of operations that are performed to complete the work. So transactions are a set of operations. Transaction is nothing but what? Set of operations that are used to perform a logical set of work. So to complete one work, we need to complete different types of operations, different types of activities we need to complete. So that all operations, that are all activities are nothing but what? Transactions. That are all operations or that are all activities are nothing but what? Transactions. So a transaction usually means that the data in the database has changed. So usually the data will be changed or updated or deleted or inserted for any reason. The data maybe gets updated. So that is all about to transactions updates. So whenever the data is inserted, it will be one transaction. Whenever the data is updated, that will be one transaction. So usually it means that the data in the database has been changed. It is being changed for every time. So that each and every time will be updated and that will becomes like a transaction. So one of the major uses of DBMS is to protect the user's data, from system failures or power failures or any disk failures or anything. So the major uses of DBMS is to protect the user data. So which may be organizational data, which may be personal data, which may be files data, anything. So you need to protect them all. So executing the same program multiple times will generate multiple transactions. So executing the same program for multiple times will generate multiple transactions. So for doing of multiple transactions, we can use it for multiple times. So example, the transaction to be performed to withdraw cash from an ATM visible or machine. So transaction to be performed to withdraw some cash or withdraw some amount. So for that, we are going to perform different types of operations, set of operations that you have to follow. So consider the following examples for transaction operations are mentioned below. So here the ATM transaction. So ATM transaction, for what purpose we are going to use this transaction? We are going to withdraw money. So the transaction name is what? A transaction name is withdrawal money. So to withdraw that money, what are the set of operations we need to follow or we need to perform? So to complete the task of money withdrawal, how many steps we need to follow? How many operations we need to follow? So whenever you perform the transaction, so you need to insert the card. So now the transaction is started. So here insert the card. Then next it is asking you to select the language for your transaction. You can select either choice of your language. The next enter the amount before that select saving an account option. So select account option, either it is saving or either it is current account. Select saving account option. Then next it is asking you to enter the amount you want to withdraw. Enter the amount to how much amount you want to withdraw. Then next enter that amount, so 5,000 or some 10,000. Then next enter your secret pin. Then next after entering the pin, it is asking you to, it is saying that what, wait for some time for processing. After processing completed, it is asking you to collect your cash and collect your card. So after collecting the cash only, you can collect your card. After collecting the cash only, you can collect your card. So with that, your transaction is completed. With that, your transaction is completed. So here, to complete this all the transaction, to complete this all the operations, to complete this transaction, to complete this single transaction. So single transaction is nothing but what? Money transfer. So single transaction, money transfer transaction, we have performed different types of steps. We have performed different types of steps or operations. So that all the operations are included with these operations can be performed in a transaction. What operations? Those are read or access data, read or access data, write or change data, write or change data, and commit operation. Commit operation. So one is what? Read or access data. Second one is write or change data. And next third one is what? Commit the data. Commit your transaction. So now the transaction is started. So transaction is started. Select the language, select the saving account option, enter amount. These are all becomes like a read operation. These are all becomes like a read operation. Whenever the amount get out to withdrawal, then it will be automatically performed write operation. So after completing all that operations, finally it is asking you to choose another option. Then you said no or yes. So after that it is committed. After that it is a committed. So here we can we have the example like a transfer of 50 rupees from account A to account B. So nowadays we can have different types of UPI transfers, right? So in that all the transfers, how your data is updated, how your withdrawal balance is updated, deposit balance is updated. So with this transaction, we can conclude that every transaction is to be updated for the database update operations, for the database updations. So see here, initially the amount is what? A equals to 500 rupees. So A account holder can have the 500 rupees in his account, and the B account holder can have the 800 rupees in his account, and this data is actually brought to RAM from hard disk, so which is already stored in hard disk, and when you perform money transfer, it is brought to the RAM memory. So now it is going to be performed with the read or write or commit operation. So now first it is performed with the read operation. Now it is performed with the read operation. So read of A account holder. So read of A account holder. So if it is read, it shows that what the amount of account, that is 500 rupees it is showing. Then next deducting 50 rupees from A account. So whenever A account holder transfers 50 rupees to B account, then it is automatically deducting from A account. It is automatically deducting 50 rupees from A account. So after deducting that amount, now it is performed with the write operation. Because the amount of deduction, of amount will be transferred to the second account holder. So now it is automatically updated. So updated in RAM, the amount is what? 450 rupees. Amount is what? 450 rupees in A account. 450 rupees in A account. It is updated because before it is committed, it is updated. And now if we are accessing from the B account holder, accessed from RAM, it is incremented, it is added to the B account. The 50 rupees which is deducted from A account is going to be added into the B account. Now account B is added with that 50 rupees. Now the amount of B account is going to be shown like what? 850 rupees. So here 50 rupees added to this B account means it performs write operation. To add that 50 rupees amount to B account. After that, it is deducted from A account and it is added to the B account. The transfer of account has been successfully completed, and the money is also deducted from A account and the money is credited into B account. So the read and write operations are successfully executed. Now the commit operation times takes place to complete the transaction. Commit operation takes place to complete the transaction by storing permanently. And uses of transaction management. So to do this all in the regular basis, what is the main uses of transaction management? So DBMS is used to schedule the access of data concurrently. So accessing the data concurrently is the main uses. It means that the user can access multiple data. From the database without being interfered with each other transaction. That means somebody is going to be transfer account to other account, and somebody is going to be see that account balance, and somebody is going to be adding beneficiary from other accounts also. So to do this all the transactions at the same time, it is not going to be affected for any reason. So at that moment, you need to manage the concurrency process. It is also used to satisfy ACID properties. So what are the ACID properties? Atomicity properties, consistency property, and isolation property, and a durability property. To satisfy these all properties, also we can use transaction management. And it is used to solve read or write conflict. It is also used to solve read or write conflicts. So whenever the read operations or write operations are executed at the same time, then it will get some conflicts. So to solve them also, we can use this transaction management. And it is used to implement recoverability, serializability, and cascading. So it is used to implement recoverability, serializability, and cascading. It is also used for concurrency control protocols and locking of data also. The transactions are used to lock your data and provide security or privacy to the data from other users. So by managing these, some certain limitations are also there. So limitations of using a transaction. It may be difficult to change the information within the transaction database by end users. So it may be difficult to change the information within the transaction database by end users. So we need to always roll back the data. And start from beginning rather than continue from the previous state. So always roll back and start from the beginning and continuing the previous state. So what is the previous state? From that you are going to be performed continuously. And here, what are the states that are performed to complete your transactions? So transaction states. The states through which a transaction goes during its lifetime. The states which are used to complete the transaction or progressing the transaction, it goes during the lifetime. It goes during its lifetime. So the following states which are going to be tell about the current state of the transaction. So what is the current state of the transaction, and also tells how we will further do the processing in the upcoming transactions also. So what is the current state of the transaction and what is the future status of the transaction? That is all you need to know about it. Transaction states. So these states govern the rules which decides the fate of the transaction, which decides the fate of the transaction, whether it will commit or abort. So whenever the transactions are started and the transactions are processed, at that moment each and every progress is being maintained in the certain state. So all that states are implemented to complete your transaction from starting itself. So complete your transaction from starting itself. So what are the states? What are the states? So here the first state is what? Active state. First state is what? Active state. So it performs with the read and write operations. It performs with the read and write operations. So whenever it performs after read and write operation, it takes automatically into partially committed state. It takes automatically into partially committed state. So if it is partially committed state, then the transaction is going to be save in permanent. Save in permanent. That is, it is moved to the committed state. It is moved to the committed state. So after it is moved to the committed state, that indirectly says that what? The data saves permanently. Data saves permanently in database. So data saves permanently in database. So now the active state is committed to the partial state, then next committed full state, then next committed to terminated state. So after successful transaction, it is going to be terminated. It is going to be terminated. So this is all in the case of success of the transaction. It is all in the case of success of the transaction. Success of the transaction. That is not having any transaction failures. But in the case of partially committed to this failed state, so partial committed, sometimes it is going to be fail. So that failed state is going to be aborted state. That failed state is going to be aborted state. So after aborting state, if in this state you can roll back again, you can roll back your data. In this state you can roll back your data, but after this aborted state too, it is becoming terminated state. Now you cannot able to roll back the data. You cannot able to roll back the data. So this is the way in failure state. So if active state is failed with the failure state, then it is automatically aborted state. It is automatically implemented in aborted state. From that it is being terminated state. So this is all about two states that are being performed during the transactions, whenever the transaction gets failure and whenever the transaction gets success. So during the failure, it processes all the transaction states like active state to failure states, or active state to partially committed state to failed state, then next aborted state, then next terminated state, So this is the way the transaction states have been implemented. So in this active state, so first of all, active state indicates what? So the active state is the first state of every transaction. Active state is the first state for every transaction. In this state, the transaction is being executed. For example, insertion or deletion or updating a record is done here. So inserting or deleting or updating the record is done here. But all the records are still not saved to the database. Because it is not in the committed state. It is in the active state only. So it is the first state of every transaction. So that is being executed. And next, partially committed. So in the partially committed state, the transaction executes its final operation. But the data is still not saved to the database, because here also it is not fully committed. In the total mark calculation example, a final display of the total mark step is executed in the state. So final display of the total mark step is executed in the step. So committed state. The next one is what? Committed state. So a transaction is said to be in committed state. If it executes all its operations successfully. So transaction is said to be committed if and only if it executes all its operations successfully. In this state, all the effects are now permanently saved on the database system. So all the effects are now permanently saved on the database system. So after committing only, all the database entities or database tables or anything will be saved permanently. And failed state. So if any of the checks made by the database recovery system fails, if any of the checks made by the database recovery system fails, then the transaction is said to be in the failed state. So then the transaction is said to be in failed state. So in the example of total mark calculation, example, if the database is not able to fire a query to fetch the marks, then the transaction will fail to execute. So if it is not fired a query exact what the result you want, then the transaction will fail to execute it. Aborted state. If any of the checks fail and the transaction has reached a failed state, then the database recovery system will make sure that the database is in its previous consistent state. Then it says that what? It is in previous consistent state. If not, then it will abort or roll back the transaction to bring the database into consistent state. So if it is not rollback, means it is in previous consistent state. If it will be moved into rollback state, then the database is into consistent state. If the transaction fails in the middle of the transaction, then before executing the transaction, all the executed transactions are rolled back to its consistent state. After aborting the transaction, the database recovery module will select one of the two operations. What are those two operations? One is restart the transaction, and the second one is the kill the transaction. One is restart the transaction, and the second one is what? Kill the transaction. So there is a choice of rollback in your state. But it is in the previous state. It is in previous inconsistent state. Only it will be rollbacked. So this is all about two transaction states. Once again, we revise the topic which we discussed in this session. So here the first one is what is meant by transaction. So what is meant by transaction? A transaction is nothing but set of operations that are completed to work. So that are used to complete the work. So usually there is a set of operations will be there. Set of operations or set of activities will be there. So all that operations are related to the transaction only. So the transaction steps are here. Take an example as ATM transactions. Suppose withdrawal money will be the transaction. So reading the data, writing the data, and committing the data, all are the transaction operations. So to perform all the transaction operations, we can use this read or write and commit operations. So this is the example, which is a money transfer, online transfer from account A to account B. So whenever it is deducted or whenever it is added, the read and write operations are performed automatically. So uses, what are the uses of transaction management? So what are the uses means? The main uses is what? To access of data concurrently. and this help us to lock your data also. The transactions applies to lock your data also with the help of what? With the help of concurrency control protocols. So implementing concurrency control protocols is one such a use of these transactions. And the transaction states. What are the transaction states? So active action state. Action state is one state, that is active state. So it is offered in two-way states. One is what? A success of the transaction, and the second one is what? A failure of the transaction. One is what? Success of the transaction, and which contains success transactions. Active state to partially committed state, partially committed state to committed state, then next terminated state, then next terminated state. So this is about to successful transaction. But if any transaction get fail, if any transaction will get fail, then it is like what? Active state to failed state, or active state to partial committed state, then next move to the failed state, then next move to the aborted state, then next move to the terminated state, the next move to the terminated state. So this is the way the states are being performed. The states are being performed for each and every transaction. The states are processed during the transaction to be completed. So starting of the transaction to completing of the transaction, for each and every transaction, the transaction states have been executed. States have been executed. So that's why the transaction management are executed parallelly and concurrently in the different locations. Parallelly and concurrently in the different locations. So here we can see the active state. So the starting of the transaction is active state, and the transaction executes its final operation but not saves data permanently is nothing but what? Partially committed. And it executes all its operations and saves data permanently means it is committed. And if any database recovery system failures, then it will be again rollback into failed state. So that is failed state. And last, aborted state. If any checks fails, then the database recovery module will select any of the operation, like what? Restart the transaction and kill the transaction. So by doing these two, restarting or kill the transaction, you can able to restarting your transaction, or else you can start with a fresh transaction. So this is all about to transaction management, transaction operations, and transaction states. Thank you all.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.